Good morning, everybody. I know it's early. Glad to see everybody got some breakfast and coffee and that kind of stuff because 8 o'clock's a little early, but you're a little past 8 o'clock last night. So I'm glad you guys are here. I do have a disclaimer to start with, so especially since we're being recorded, and this is for posterity and all of that good stuff. The information that I'm going to share today is accurate to the best of my knowledge today. We all work in this industry. We know how dynamic it is. It can change. Something can change tomorrow. Since we're recording this, I want to make sure that we share that. So, in 2 months, somebody says, well, hey, that's not true. Even things change. So I want to make sure that I get that kind of out there. And we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to talk to you guys today a little bit about owning your monkeys. Circus Peanuts. Got a little music to start with. And John, thank you so much because he's going to be more difficult to make sure things run the way they're supposed to. If it would click. Because, we can't get started unless we have some uplifting peanut music together. And maybe an ad.
Yes, an ad first.
Yeah. That kind of applies. Welcome to the circus, everybody. We're in leadership, right? It's our circus. How many of you have ever heard or uttered the phrase, not my circus, not my monkeys? I have. Guess what? What we're going to talk about today is that, oh my gosh, they are your monkeys. And how we're going to be able to facilitate making sure that we are able to herd those monkeys in the right direction. Just lay it right there, that would be great. And keep them going the way we need them to go.
Is it not working?
It is not working, but that's all right. We're going to keep moving on. Circus music will stop in just a second. And we'll get going. I'm going to share a couple of disclosures while we're working on that. I own my own consulting company. Stirnkorb Consulting. It's an LLC. I work nationally and globally with attorneys and facilities and physicians to improve MRI and imaging safety. So it's not just focused on MRI, but that's my wheelhouse. So, and the other part is I do work with several vendors in a consortium. The primary two being Aegis, the creators of TechGate, and the other is Chea USA, manufacturers of walk-through security and handheld metal ferrous detectors. So I'm not going to talk about any of those products today, but I am affiliated with those, so I do want to let you guys know that.
I don't know what's going on.
Here we go. All right. So a little about me. Who is this crazy Southern woman that's standing up here talking about Monday morning? Well, I graduated from the University of South Alabama. Roll Tide, anybody?
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide, woo! Here we go. We have some Huskers in the house. Nevada, you got nothing yet, right? But we're about to get to, the Raiders?
Yeah.
Okay, you'll at least have a little something going on.
Go Knights.
Go Knights?
Go Knights.
Oh. I know, I'm sorry, that still throws me off that we think about Nevada not being a desert and then having a big giant hockey rink. So. And then we have Texas in the house. I'm not sure about the gentleman in the back. And Stephen, where are you from? Texas, okay. North Carolina, Tar Heels. Yep. I'm sorry. No, just teasing. It's fun. It's fun to be able to talk about sports, particularly since we're here during an Olympic year and the Olympics are going on right now.
Sorry.
That's all right. So I'm a member of AHRA. I'm a certified radiology administrator. My career started in Mobile, Alabama. So anybody know where Mobile, Alabama is? Yeah. How about Gulf Shores? There we go. I worked at Mobile Infirmary Medical Center and wrote a paper because I was kind of frustrated about the MRI safety practices at our facility, and I got in a little bit of trouble for that. But it gained a little bit of attention, and I was recruited by Mayo to come up and help design and build the MRI safety program for the Northwest Wisconsin region. So from there, I went to the University of Chicago Medicine because I thought I'd been out in Wisconsin for a while. I wanted to see what it's like to live in the big city. Was there long enough to realize that I did not like academia and I did not like living in a big city. So what do? I go to Washington, D.C. because I was out of my mind. But I actually worked for a Johns Hopkins hospital there for a couple of years, and it was a great experience. I love the area. It's beautiful. If you haven't had a chance to go in your lifetime, please put that on your bucket list. The commute is a booger. It does take about 2 hours to get just to the grocery store, just because of traffic. Got my MBA in finance. I'm currently pursuing my Ph.D. in leadership and development, Lean Six Sigma, Green Belt, all that good stuff. A couple of committees, the American Board of MRI Safety, SMRT, that kind of stuff. So it is possible to be active in your organizations and kind of impact some change there. The other part of it is the MBA you kind of have to have for your degree when you get to a director level or above if you want to continue to advance. And then some of us are just crazy and working on the PhD component as well. So when I was asked to come out to Scottsbluff, Nebraska to interview for a position as the director and as the dean, I went out and I thought, yeah, I'll go out and see what it's like. It's a beautiful place. I'll show you guys some pictures. But my friends and my family, Nebraska? Why do you want to go to Nebraska? Here's why I go to Nebraska. That's a view that I drive by going to work every day, cross over the river, and that is actually in my backyard. This is Scottsbluff National Monument, and it is pretty historic, actually, if I remember my history right. It is the halfway point on the Oregon Trail from Kansas City to Oregon. And it was a huge landmark because it is Nebraska. It's kind of flat, a little bit of rolling greenery in the eastern part of the state. When you get out to the western part of the state, then you're getting more into the mountainous areas and the Badlands kind of stuff. So it's really pretty out there, and that is actually the Oregon Trail going right through those 2 points. So it's a really pretty area. The other part of it was I was moving from a big, huge system at Mayo, big, huge academic center at the University of Chicago, big, huge system at Johns Hopkins, to a standalone level 2 regional hospital that's 220 beds. So it was a different environment for me to kind of work in to see if I could affect some change. So those of you that are here today, how many of you are clinical radiology folks? How many of you are biomed folks? Is everyone in here a leader, a supervisor, manager, director? All right. What do you think your main role, your main job duty is as a manager?
Leading change and guiding growth.
It's a good part of it. It's a major part of it. It's also making sure that your team has everything they need to do their job and do it well, so they can follow the change that you're envisioning. So my question is, and I share this with students, I share this with techs, I share this with managers, are you doing a job? Are you following your career path? Or is what you're doing your calling? And there's nothing wrong with any of them. There's nothing wrong with any of them. But we just need to make sure we're honest with ourselves about what we're doing. So let's get back to the not my circus, not my monkeys thing. How many folks have said that? Can I get a reminder? Only 2 of us are going to admit that. Oh, come on. Okay. So, big part of your jobs as leaders is we're wrangling monkeys, aren't we? Or herding cats. Same concept. All day long we're trying to lead change, develop, get folks to follow the mission and vision of our organizations and get them to align into the path that we need them to be in. Or we release them to the competition. That's kind of what we do as well. So the biggest monkeys that I wrangle, I don't know about you guys, is my C-suite, my radiologists, and my technologists. Patients are typically the easiest part of it. They're happy, they're mad. That's fairly easy. You take care of one, you take care of the other. Administration's a little bit different. So here's kind of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about developing vocabulary and language to make sure that we can communicate effectively with our C-suite, with our leadership in radiology, whether that is the chief, the division chair. I have an outsourced radiology group. That's a whole different dynamic that you work with. And while this is specific to radiology, it also applies to biomedical and clinical engineering because it's the same concepts. You're still trying to work with C-suites. You're still trying to work with department directors, radiologists to get new equipment in and that kind of thing. So I hope you guys can see the things there that you can utilize as well. And then the leadership in the departments, whether that's us, whether that is our managers or our supervisors, and then our frontline technologists or our technicians that are working on it. I'm going to try a video here. And I'm just curious, how many of you guys ever watched the television show House? Are you guys like me where you watch these shows and you're like, man, the x-ray's upside down? Come on!
Yeah.
I mean, the x-ray's upside down, and nobody does it.
Clarified it for you. What? I don't even remember. It's just a fancy way of saying small adrenaline secreting tumor. Yeah, I clarified it for you. All you need to know is if I'm right, we can fix it. Just gotta find it first. You need an MRI. It's completely painless for most people, but not for me. So you get those tattoos in prison. Yes.
Yes. Okay, your scan distractors will do.
So, what you got?
I got a story.
Okay,
I'd like to
sure.
comment on that. I was an MRI technologist for several years. And we, in our radiologists kept telling us, make all the patients take off all their makeup because it will gather and mess up the imaging. So I had, years ago, had my eyebrows tattooed on. No problem. I got in there to check scans all the time, no problem. I went to a place to have them touched up, and they used a foreign product that had more metal in it. And I started breaking out and having, I knew I was having an allergic reaction. So I went in the MRI, and I said, use the strongest gradients you can find. And when I was in there, now this was a new tattoo. Okay, so when I was in there, I felt little tiny crackling, little tiny, across my eyes. And then after that, the infection went away, the problem went away.
Remove the
It
impurities.
actually did pull some of the metallic properties out of there that were causing the problems. It actually did pull it out.
Oh, wow.
Would we get artifacts and stuff?
No, it wasn't.
Well, thank you for
But I
sharing.
wasn't going, ah!
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And that's most likely the more common reaction when someone has it, or actually when someone goes into an MRI unit. The prisoning thing, there's some validity there. At that point, had he stopped, he would have been pretty much accurate. Yes, sometimes, actually, most prison tattoos that are done by the inmates are from copier ink, the old school copier inks, and it is heavy metal. It's not going to yank it out of your skin like that. It's just not. And who has positions in the United States in different parts of the world? Europe and India, for instance, physicians they do participate in imaging. Has a radiologist ever walked into your MRI department and sat down and scanned a patient? You can hardly get, I love my radiologists. For the most part, you can hardly get them to come in to do the Bs they're supposed to do or the arthrograms they're supposed to do because that's just the nature of the beast right now. To actually sit down and image a patient, even at a research facility, that's not going to happen.
Grey's Anatomy is filled with that.
Yep, exactly.
I've never ever seen a surgeon walk in and, hey, hop on the scanner and let me scan you.
Yeah, not going to happen.
You don't even know how, dude.
I'm surprised that he knew it was a scan. That's exactly it. But that's not their wheelhouse. That's not what they're there for. But that's kind of what the technologists and us as leaders have to overcome, that court of public opinion. Because if it's on TV, it's got to be real, right? The only thing more real than TV is Facebook, correct? If it's on Facebook, it is fact. If it is on TV, it becomes encultured, indoctrinated into us. So far, since TV's been around, the medical dramas have been on, and MRI came about 30 plus years ago. There have been these stories, this kind of sharing that has happened that has patients and physicians and even some non-MRI techs that have grown up thinking that, I can't go in if I have a tattoo, I can't go in if I have piercings, I can't take care of patients if I'm in that environment, and if it's a patient, I'm not going to put them in there. So let's see what we can do to overcome some of that. So one of the first monkeys that we're going to talk about is our administration. I'm in administration, Ms. Spencer in administration, but we have folks that we answer to as well, whether that is our C-suite or VP, the board of trustees, the board of directors, whatever that might be. Everyone has someone else that they're answering to. Even if you're a board member, you're answering to the community that you're supporting. So you got to make what you're doing make sense. You got to make what you're doing clearly communicated out to the folks that are above you and those that you're leading. So you have to have the right kind of vocabulary words, the right kind of language. You have to be able to speak the language in terms and meet those folks where they are with their level of understanding, with their level of engagement. Part of that takes building some relationships. Stephen talked earlier in the weekend about exactly that. And some of us are really good at it. Some of us are not so good at it. It's something that we really have to work on. One of the biggest challenges as an MR tech that I faced on the front line was getting my ICU nurses to understand how important it was to screen our patients, because to them it was another task that they had to do, and they were resistant, is probably the most polite word to use. The other part of it was they didn't feel it was their job. And it probably wasn't. I prefer to own that myself as an MRI technologist, because then I know it's been done properly. But there are different levels that we need to take as far as screening goes, and according to the ACR, patients should be screened at least twice. So I asked nursing leadership if I could come and present MR safety to the leadership council, and they said, sure, you can have 20 minutes. So I went and I did that, and once they understood that MR safety was patient safety, they were the biggest advocates that I had for MRI safety. So it was a great opportunity to speak to them in their terms, at their level, to get them to understand that patient care was not just measuring input and output and making sure that appropriate meds were given. That's a huge part of it. But it's also outside of the nursing floor. It's an MRI, it's MRI safety, it's radiation safety. It's all kinds of things that we do every day to make sure that our patients stay safe. Just out of curiosity, if you are in imaging, how many of you have an MR Safety Committee in your area, in your department? Some people do, some people don't. Other folks have incorporated MR Safety into the Radiation Safety Committee. Have you done that? That's actually the more common thing. It's at least it's a subcommittee at best. Typically, it's just another partnership, and it's a blurb in the agenda. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then a little bit about service-oriented, patient-centric care. So, just out of curiosity, those of you that are in imaging, and those of you that are in biomed and clinical engineering, how many of you guys are technologists? Okay. How many of your directors are technologists? If you are the director, that still counts. All right. Do you have a manager or supervisor in your department that reports to you, that is in your MRI department, or in CT or ultrasound? They're not a technologist in that area. That is so good to hear. I actually worked with an organization where the director was a nurse. The director of radiology was a nurse, and I had concerns about that. She was a little bit unique in that she made it her main mission in the first year of her directorship to spend months in each department learning about it. She was a nurse, she was an IR nurse, so she was a little bit familiar, had no clue about ultrasound, had no clue about MRI, but she made herself knowledgeable about it. The growing trend, and we all know this, and that's why those of us are working on masters or PhDs, is it's more common now, particularly in larger organizations, for a business person to be the director or the VP or the manager or whatever for the department that has no clinical knowledge whatsoever. I am diametrically opposed to that particular idea, but people make business decisions based on business. But I think it's important that we all advocate for our profession. So, enough preaching about that. How many of you guys make the right thing the easy thing to do for your folks? How many of you at least try to do that? We all try. We all try. And sometimes our hands are bound by whether it's money, whether it's technology, whether it's maybe not having the right vocabulary words, or maybe having some resistance from above because maybe we don't know all the pieces that are happening that are affecting that. My vice president sees me coming down the hall and I swear he ducks because he knows I'm coming to ask for money, FTEs, I need a service contract renegotiated, I got it done, I'm ready to go, I just need your signature. Or he's coming at me and I'm ducking because he's wanting to know about our latest key performance indicators and metrics and all this other stuff. And I've been in my new role for about 7 months. I spent the first 5.5 building those relationships with my staff. Spent the last 4 trying to rebuild my staff. A lot of openings. I had 0. I'm so proud of this. I'm going to brag a little bit. When I got to my department, I had right about 20 travelers, agency folks. We're out in western Nebraska. It's hard to recruit, and it's even harder to retain out there. We had about 20 travelers, 20 agency techs. You guys know how expensive that is. I will talk a little bit out of school and said in 2017 to the tune of about $700,000 in agency wages in my department alone. 7 months, I now have 0 travelers. But we have a lot of green techs. So it's a little bit of a balance there.
Can you reiterate what WOBUS is?
I can. Worked hours per unit of service.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. So I apologize about that. But so staffing models, do you have your hands in the schedule for your individual departments? I don't. I did that for years. That is the most painful thing on the planet, is to try to make sure all of your resources are covered, and you have FMLAs and PTO, and we have something called EIVs. I don't even know what that is. It's sick leave of some sort, but trying to coordinate all of that with weddings and babies and grandchildren and all this other stuff, that is the most painful part of being in leadership. So I delegate the crap out of that. That goes to the managers, that goes to the supervisors up front, which is more appropriate because they know. And they also know their needs. My only edict is we're taking care of our patients. Make sure we're staffed. Make sure we're safely staffed. So worked hours per unit of service, what are your volumes and what are your exam types? Now, I have a friend of mine, he's an architect, he's a brilliant guy, we talk MR safety quite a bit, and he says, well, why not just have a day where you're doing brains all day long and you just put the brain coil on and you go? Well, it doesn't work that way because we're human. And, you know.
But they'd be so happy if we did that.
You know what, when I was training in clinic, that would have been the great day to be there and say, okay, I can get on my comps, I can knock this out, I can gain some proficiency. That's not the real world. In imaging, in MRI and CT and X-ray, you're going to have the brain, the shoulder, the ankle, the knee, the belly, the prostate. You know, you're going to go all the way through all of that, and they're going to be just like that throughout the day. You're not going to have it. You would be so much more efficient. Well, I get it would be more efficient, but we have to work with what we have. We also have to meet the needs of the patient. Maybe they can only come on Monday. So make Monday brain day. Well, maybe this other guy can only come on Monday and he needs his prostate imaged. That's what we have to work with. And that's the difference between having a clinical person and a non-clinical person that's running the show. So if you guys don't mind, what are some of your key performance indicators and how do you manage your daily improvement? Do you mind sharing that? Do you guys have a safety huddle or a huddle in the mornings where you talk with your staff? What kind of information do you exchange? You guys are talking about huddles, I thought.
We do, we tried, but they are not consistent
Mm-hmm.
due to, the patient load, what's going on.
Yeah.
We can't keep them.
At the hospital that I just left, one of our managing for daily improvement methods is we did meet every morning, 6:45. That was a little painful. Hence the 2-hour commute in Washington in the morning. But it was a little painful. But we met every morning. And the biggest thing that we talked about, and here's why we met, is we had shared patients. So if a patient came in and had an MRI, and they had a nuke study, and then they had some kind of interventional procedure, we wanted to make sure, it's because we had this issue, that when MRI was done, they didn't say, hey, thanks, have a great day, and send the patient on their way, that we were able to communicate that there were other additional steps in the process. So we started out by, is equipment up or is equipment down? Green check mark for it's up, red X for it's down. That helped us trend throughout the week if we were having issues. We had a CT tube that kept arcing, we were having problems with it. So we considered it down. We were still taking care of patients, but we had a continuing issue. And we talked about our shared patients and where they were and where they were going, and we coordinated all of that. So it looked like it was a smooth, seamless transition. When the patient got there, we were chaos in the morning. The patient didn't know that. And then we talked about what our volumes were for the day, our expected scheduled outpatients, because we all know nobody gets add-ons throughout the day. Everybody does the crazy inpatients. So, but those are the other things that we talked about. And then because we had this particular problem, and I don't know if you guys do or not, we had what we call unreported, where that exam had been completed, it had been dictated, but the radiologist had not clicked the finalize button yet. And it would sit there. We don't see it anymore. It drops off the screen. The radiologist doesn't see it anymore because they have read it. They just haven't clicked the little sign complete thing. So we actually built into our Epic EMR a report to run unreported, and then it became the supervisor's job to go to that radiologist and say, hey, Dr. Johnson, I need you to do this so the bill will drop. And those were major managing for daily improvement things. It really helped make sure that the patient flow throughout the organization went well. And then you have your MRI technologists. Aren't we a diva bunch? We are. I'm going to own it. We are. But all of us are. CT folks, IR folks, cath lab folks. Cath lab folks are probably they're the cream of the crop, right?
Just.
Do they have ultrasound?
No
MRI's down
ultrasound.
the list.
Yeah, there's a hierarchy, and we might not want to say there is, but I think MRI techs are the best. I'm a little biased. So what are the individual attitudes of the technologists that you have working for you? We all have some of those rock stars, and we all have some of those folks that have retired on the job. And most folks fall in between. Statistically, if we want to get into all of that, it's probably a normal distribution bell curve. What we'd like to do is shift that and have more of those rock stars and let the folks that have retired on the job retire off the job so we can replace them with rock stars. So do we engage them? Do we invest in them? Are we coaching them? Are we counseling them? Are we coaching them before we counsel them? I, early in my career, was hesitant to have those kind of crucial conversations. I did not like conflict. I still don't. I've gotten really good at pretending I'm good at it, though. Fake it till you make it, right? That is what you do sometimes. Do you have competencies for your techs? Are they written? Do they know what's expected of them? Some of us do, some of us don't. And then, do we offer them educational opportunities? I have a fiscal year that's January 1 through December 31st. You would think that we would have a budget approved by December 30th or 31st. Not so much. We just had our budget approved. That was our operational budget last week. So I've already missed 6 weeks of the year where I can start doing stuff. That's all right. It's a new day. It's a new day. Still don't have my capital budget. Still don't have my FTE budget. The first thing that's cut from a budget when you're trying to save some money is education. And that's a sad thing because that's one area where we can particularly save a lot of money, particularly in safety-related education. Because all it takes is one event to hurt a patient, and your return on investment is gold at that point. Money talks. Administration loves to hear about money. They love to hear about new business lines, new service lines. When's the last time you had a new service line that you were able to present to your staff or to your admin? A new service that you could offer. Is it working on MRI guided breast biopsy tools, instruments, the device? Not everybody's doing breast biopsy. Is it peripheral artery disease for your IR folks or your cath lab folks? Is it, do you have your lung cancer screening so you can have that program? Do you have that ready to go for CT? Some places do, some places don't. Sadly, not as many as I would think, and there's good reimbursement for that. And then radiologists, have you partnered with them? I am fortunate where I am at that our radiologists are very engaged. It's kind of unique for me. I worked in an academic environment where the radiologists run the show. It's all about research, and it's all about them, and it's all about what they're doing, and they wanted to make sure that things are aligned the way they want, and we would have the Dr. Odo protocol for this and the Dr. Johnson protocol for that, and it's the same body part. So I didn't win that particular argument to get them standardized, but we did come up with something that would at least condense them down a little bit. So instead of having 128 protocols for a brain MRI, we only had 3, so, which is a nice thing. Are they participating in image quality results? Are they letting you know when they're seeing something that might be an artifact that your service folks can help you with? Or are they letting you know that this tech's really not good at doing arthrograms? They're really not good at doing elbows. Perhaps you get them some additional training. And then are you and are your techs, which is the more important thing, able to have knowledgeable conversations with them? As a tech, I did this. I'm guilty of it, so I'm going to share the conversation. Hi, Dr. Jones. I got a patient on the table. Would you take a look at their images? Yeah, it's a brain. No, I don't know the MRN. Hold on a second. Yeah, it's da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, hold on. It's on the flare. And at this time, the radiologist is about to lose their mind because their phone's ringing off the hook. They have a study up that they're trying to read, and they have a tech babbling to them incoherently on the phone. However, if you call and you say, hey, Dr. Johnson, I'm scanning a 42-year-old female with a history of MS. I have her on the table. I have the TT flare up. Can you please look at slice 8? Let me know if that's something that we need to do something about. And at that point, they pull it up, they look at slice 8, they go, that's normal, you're all good, thanks. And it's over. So being able to have that conversation tech to physician in a respectful manner helps a lot. And it builds the rapport of the tech and their reputation and their confidence level and the radiologist's confidence in them. Have anybody had that first conversation before as a tech? Anybody had the second one? Yeah. You get there. So I'm going to share with you a little bit. We were talking about key performance indicators. How many folks have press gaining, patient satisfaction, employee satisfaction stuff? And that's the wave of the future. So we're going to listen to Doc Vader talk a little bit about where he's feeling his pain.
Well, I was enjoying the video. Let me see if y'all can enjoy the video.
Doc Vader is the one.
If you have not found Doc Vader on YouTube, he verbalizes what we all feel. And it's funny, but it's also the truth. John's going to get it up here for us and let's take a peek.
Sorry, guys. It's not wanting to save the setting.
The internet is a wee bit sketchy here. I don't know if you guys have found that to be the case or not. It's kind of slow and it's a little sketchy. And with the recording running and videos running and that kind of thing, we're taxing the bandwidth. So John is getting it together for us. So while he's doing that, getting it ready, do you guys have any questions about what we've talked about so far? have some key performance indicators you want to share. What are you guys looking at in your organization besides more volume?
Procedures. I do a quality project. CTD, I just tracking. Excuse me. Productivity. I track my equipment, not only how many days, hours, not days, but by hour, that it's down and how many patients are affected, as well as employee satisfaction, internal satisfaction.
Yeah. Do you have this conversation with your staff? Our patient satisfaction scores are this. Here's where we would like to be. How can we get there? Well, that's not fair because we have the hardest patients on the planet to take care of.
We don't have time.
We don't have time to take care of them. We can't spend that. Oh, we're too busy. Our patients are so demanding. Or our demographic is actually not. We had someone that decided to use that particular terminology. Well, we take care of people who are very fluid and they have a higher level of expectations and we just can't meet those. And my argument for that is the numbers are the numbers. We can't argue with those. So what we can do is say, here's where we're at right now. Here's where we want to be. How can we get there? And kind of take that, but this off the table. You're still going to probably hear it in the break room.
Which doc reader are you looking for? Hospital admin or patient satisfaction?
Patient satisfaction. It's there. We're just trying to get it to fit up there. We're having some technical.
There we go.
There he is.
My computer's scared.
That's
So what about employee satisfaction? What are you guys doing for employee satisfaction? Do you recognize your staff?
all right.
Applies across the board. Here we go.
Have a seat.
I don't know what happened there.
That's okay. We can just keep going. You guys get an opportunity to check out Doc Bader. That's actually hilarious. Thank you. Thanks, John. One of the other videos that I was hoping to show, we don't need to go there, is patient satisfaction.
This man right here is my great grandfather.
Okay, that's the next one. Where Doc Bader's talking about patient satisfaction scores, they get paid in his buttocks. So it is hilarious. If you get an opportunity, take a peek at it. There we go. We talked a little bit earlier about administration and how we have to balance what something costs with the benefits that we're going to get from it. And we all know that we have to do those cost analysis things and those kind of metrics that we have to provide to them. But how are we communicating that out to our staff? I have an IR team that is very angry with me because they want a blanket warmer in IR. We have one 10 steps down the hallway, but it's not efficient for them to go 10 steps down the hallway and get a warm blanket for the patient, so they want one in the room. Blanket warmers and fluid warmers on them, not $12,000. Then you have biomed that gets to work on them when they break. But in the meantime, I haven't bought one because the budget hasn't been approved yet. It was $12,000, and I'd rather use that $12,000 to send them to SIR than to buy a warmer that they can walk 10 feet down the hallway and get their blanket for. I don't know that they appreciate that very much right now, but that's all right. So how many of you guys have these radiologists in your department? The most beautiful doctors in America. Yeah. They all see themselves that way. Male, female, it doesn't matter. These happen to be all male. That's the men's edition. There is a female edition too. So I don't know about you guys, but my interactions with radiologists are typically, you have the Zen radiologist, he's a minority. He wants to make everyone happy. Typically he's young. He's like, yeah, okay, let's do that. And then when someone else goes and says the same thing, he's like, no, I don't think so. That might not be a good idea. It's kind of wishy-washy. And then you have Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Most common occurrence for radiologists. Typically, they've been doing this at least 10 years, and they're a little salty and cranky and crusty. In reality, most of them are just multitasking like crazy. They're answering phones for ordering providers. They're talking to clinicians up on the floor. They're trying to interpret and read, and I'm so impressed that they still have phone up there. And a phone that with a cord on it versus a cell phone. And they're signing off on other orders that they might be doing. So this must obviously be before an electronic medical record. But they're all trying to multitask. And that's why it's so important that the technologists that are making these phone calls are concise in what they need to talk about, but also us. How many of you guys that are directors have a weekly or monthly or quarterly meeting with your chief or chiefs if you're in a big organization? I meet for about 15 minutes. I grab a cup of coffee, grab Dr. Chet a cup of coffee, and we go and sit down and say, okay, what's going on today? What do you have going on? 15 minutes. We do that daily. I'm in a small organization. We're able to do that. He walks to work. So, I mean, he's right there. He's close by. University of Chicago Medicine, I didn't see the chiefs except quarterly at QI report outs or if there was a problem. So it really helps with communication if you guys are at least on the same team. All about that relationship building that we were talking about. And that starts with your radiologist and with your upper admin and with your techs. Speaking of techs and admin and radiologists, how many of you have herded cats before? I'll be honest with you guys, that's what we do every day. We're herding cats.
He's the first cat herder in our town.
That's good, John. How many of you guys herd cats every day? We do. Whether it is we're trying to coordinate everybody and get them to where they need to be. Whether you are biomed, whether you are in leadership, we're herding cats. Some of them are easier to herd than others. The best part of that video is the guy that sneezed. Analogy. I'm herding cats. But would you made a decision in your career when you're in a leadership role, would you change? We don't do what we do because we love it. Organizations are like relationships, and we all know that. At least most of us are of an age. Some of us are very, very young and may not have had a relationship yet, even a boyfriend, girlfriend in high school. But organizations are much like developing and crafting those relationships that are personal. We have to work on them. Some of us are really good at it, and some of us need a little help. And if you fail to build some solid relationships, or even worse, you tick someone off or create a bad perception, it takes a long time to recover from that. So I'm going to try something here. We'll see if it works. This is from The Office, and it's a Dwight clip. And he's a monkey. He's a cat. There we go. And I'm curious how many of you have had this conversation with your staff. Isn't that great? He's my idol. I love that. Here's the most important part of that though. Dwight says, I'm about to do something. I think. He pauses. So he pauses and he says, "What do you do that?" And I do that thing. That's all we really ask of anyone, to think about what it is that you're doing. Because that helps us wrangle the monkeys. And I'll be honest with you guys, I worked really, really hard trying to get the Wizard of Oz thing to release the flying monkeys kind of stuff to work, and it failed. So I didn't get there, but that's what I was working on to have at the end, is to have the release the monkeys. But then that also puts us in the witch role. So we talked a little bit earlier about who has an MR Safety Committee. So I think we had one hand, and then we had a couple of folks that have them embedded into the Radiation Safety Committee. So who are the members of your MRI committee? Do you mind sharing?
Radiologist, me, biomed, 3 of our techs, 1 of the nurses that works in the department. We do a lot of sedation cases. The director, we also pull down outpatient surgery because they prepare the patients for sedation cases. So their manager and 1 of their nurses.
Okay.
Facilities is always invited, who never shows up. So I handle that part.
Yeah, and communicate out.
We meet, we have a huddle every week.
Really? Good for you guys. So what does your committee, if you guys don't mind sharing, what do they do? Do they do anything? Do they review policies? Do they talk about events? Do you talk about extras, or do you talk about burns or things flying into your magnet? Do you mind me sharing your story?
No.
So, the gentleman was sharing earlier that he's a biomedical guy, went in during the whole MedRad chaotic thing that was going on with the pumps and removed the power supply out of the 1.5 room without incident. Went to remove the power supply for the MedRad injector out of the 3T room and pinned his arm to the magnet. He's lucky that, number one, it didn't break your arm, or 2, do worse damage to you, but it also didn't do a whole lot of damage to the machine. Gouged the flange and maybe the outer casing. And we have a survivor of an MR safety incident in our midst. No judgments. We're all friends here. Do you know if that was reported to the FDA?
I don't think it was.
And that's a scary thing because it's not uncommon. Because I'm hoping, I would think, that it was at least reported through some kind of employee incident report, or we have MIDAS. It's a safety report that goes to risk and that kind of thing. So at least it's reported internally. Hospitals are very concerned about reporting things publicly. But to that note, we know that happened. Everyone here is probably aware of something that's happened, if not within their department, within someone's that they know. My guess is that exact same process is what happened. It's reported to occupational health if somebody's hurt, if it's an employee, risk to track it, or if a patient was hurt. It's not reported outside the organization. So that makes me question what we do see on the mod report from the FDA about how valid that information is. Because is it really accurate?
By default, it's not.
Exactly, because people they don't want to be seen as being unsafe.
That affects your reimbursement.
It really does. This is just my suggestion for at least the members of an MR Safety Committee. Your radiologist champion, you got to get a radiologist involved. Whether they want to admit it or not, in the United States anyway, the radiologist is the physician that is medically, legally liable for the safe care of the patient within the imaging department. And I bet if you ask your radiologist that, they won't go. They need to know it, they should know it. They are responsible. If they read the study, they've interpreted it, and they receive professional fees for it, they're the ones in a court of law that are going to be held accountable for that safety of that patient. And a more safety officer, preferably a frontline technologist, definitely a frontline technologist if you don't have an MR safety officer that is, a physicist and an imaging administrator. Those should be your core members. Ad hoc, I like to have a nurse in there. You get a different perspective. It works best if you're a radiology nurse, but if you have a short staff and it's not possible. Risk management, if you do have those kind of events, so you can discuss it and do either an apparent cause analysis or a root cause analysis, whichever is appropriate. If you have a safety and emergency management department, perhaps have a member of those people there, and then the same with legal for the same reason. And part of the task should be making sure the policies are reviewed, the procedures are in place, and that people have the training and the understanding that they need. There are different methods of obtaining the MD medical director, the MR medical director, and the MR safety officer training. Some of them are out there, some are better than others, but they're all at least a step in the right direction. And then here's something that I'm curious about. What are your time slots looking like in your MRI department? On your 1.5, how long is your time slots? Do you mind sharing?
It depends, 30, 45, or an hour.
It depends on the study or?
Correct.
Yeah. How about you guys? Do you know? About an hour. On my 1.5s, my time slots are 45 minutes. On my 3T, they're an hour. Administration thinks 3T is stronger, it's faster. Not necessarily. It takes longer for T1s to relax at 3T than it does at 1.5. It's a time you can't change the physics of it. So that's what we did. Most of those 45-minute slots are a little long, but it gives us the time built into the time slot to make sure the patient's screened, get them all changed in the hospital-provided gear, and to exit them and absorb that add-on patient that might come in later in the day, or that ED patient. So we kind of build that in. Most of our protocols are built right around that 30 to 35-minute mark. And when I say that to admin, they say, well, then why don't you do another one? Because you can't do an MRI in 10 minutes unless it's an MRI, and we just don't have that many of those pop up by themselves. So that gives us the opportunity to absorb one of those add-on patients that Dr. Johnson is adamant gets done today, or one of the ED patients that needs to happen. Do you have appropriate protocols? I talked earlier about the Dr. Odo, the Dr. Johnson, the Dr. Ship having 28 different protocols for an MRI of the brain. Do you really need 28 different protocols? That's for the radiologists to discuss, and that's for us to have that conversation with them. So maybe they come to a consensus, and we have one routine brain, one orbits, one C-spine that maybe has 7 sequences instead of 9. I don't know about you guys, I'm an MR tech. I hated to see orbits because that was a brain in orbits. That was 17 different sequences that you had to do, and pre and post contrast. So there's the delay of continuing scanning while you go in and inject the patient, and God forbid you have an extravasation or something. So if you're able to get those protocols where they need to be, with their care, with their input, you're able to provide that compassionate care to every patient every time. Now, I shared that because when I put this slide together, I was working at Johns Hopkins, and that was the mission, that we will provide compassionate care to every patient every time. All of us have the same mission statement. It's in some kind of form or fashion, but it all includes that. So in your MRI department, do you have a chief tech or a lead tech, a supervisor? How does that work? Chief tech?
But that goes across the practice. The chief tech is for MRI department and the facility.
Yeah. Okay. Same in CT and ultrasound and that kind of thing? All right. So I asked these questions earlier. It's the leadership of your MRI department and MR tech, and then are your directors, technologists as well. So we talked earlier about what our roles were, and we talked about making sure that we had a strategic purpose and plan in place. So we set expectations. We work with the radiologists and standardize some protocols. We have some standard competencies. Now, you can't take an MR competency and stick it over in CT and say, hey, this is going to work, because they're two different things they're two different methods of practice. But it would be nice to have standard competencies out there, not just for your one organization, but if you are part of a system, all the way across the system, that takes some work. Written processes. So patients coming in for a medial entry MRI guided breast biopsy. How many of you have anybody on your team that can take care of that patient, or is there one person that's the biopsy person? I was the biopsy person. So before I left where I was at, I wrote down the entire process because I was not going to be there to do it anymore, and I wasn't going to Wisconsin from Chicago. And then write down what your best practices are. Does that include, handwritten, or either printed instructions to the patient on how to properly insert their earplugs? Because if you're an MR tech, you always notice when the patient comes out, you got one earplug kind of hanging out, one that I swear to God they're trying to shove through to the other ear without fail. And they always want to hand you their nasty earplugs, and that's just the nature of the beast. You're still taking care of the patient. But do you have something like that so they can properly insert them? Are you changing all of your patients from their street clothes into hospital-provided MR-safe clothing? We all seen the news recently about there was a death in India where it's common practice for family members to assist patients into procedures. In this particular instance, the grandson, the 32-year-old gentleman, went in to assist his grandmama for her MRI, and he's holding her oxygen tank. There were no MRI people in the department. They have assistants, which I'm going to say is a tech aid kind of thing, called ward boys. They assist the entire department. This particular ward boy says, "Come on in, the magnet's not on," because he didn't know. And the young man walks in carrying the oxygen container, and he's holding on to it. This is his grandma's. They're expensive. They're hard to come by. And it's pulling him, and he's holding on to it. Number one, he's really, really strong. You can attest to how powerful the pull is. Number two, it pulls him into the bore of the magnet. The regulator snapped off the top. Oxygen hit him in the face. His lungs collapsed, and he died. He died as a result of that. And this was because, number one, the area was unsecured. Number two, there were no MRI people in the department at the time. And the person that was there in charge, the tech aide, was not an MRI tech aide, and he didn't know that the magnet is always on. The latest news on that as of late last week was the police had arrested the radiologist, the ward boy, the physician that ordered the exam, and one other person whose name I cannot recall in this case, because the family has filed this lawsuit. So I don't know how it's going to shake out, but those people are being held accountable for that. And the radiologist's argument is I wasn't even there. So turns out all of these folks, our technologists, our technicians, our staff, our leaders, our radiologists, and our patients, they're all our monkeys. And we do own them. And we're the ringmaster. There would be a good time to play that circus music. Here we go. I share this quote because it's one that this is the one that makes me stop and think. So we need to be strong leaders, we do. But that doesn't mean we have to be rude. It doesn't mean we have to be beating folks with a stick. We can be kind, and kindness doesn't necessarily mean that we're weak. There are certain people that respond differently to different ways. I have some military folks that when you were nice to them, they didn't quite get it. So you kind of had to sharpen it up a little bit. You don't have to be ugly about it. You don't have to be a bully. You can still be bold. Be very thoughtful. And be humble. We can all learn from each other. Techs can teach me stuff. I can teach them stuff. It all works out. And we're better because of it. We can be proud of what we do. I think we are all really proud of where we have gone in our lives and where we've come from. And that doesn't mean we have to be arrogant about it, but we can also use that ambition and those goals to encourage our staff. And then to have humor. And sometimes we have to watch that. That's a fine line. It's really easy to be in a group of colleagues and share something that might be inappropriate to share with your front staff. So get your input from your rads about your protocols. Ask your doers, the ones that are engaged, those rock stars, what the best practices and processes are, and help make that more efficient. And then work with your admin team about your policies if that's necessary. In my case, the buck stops with me for policies in my department, but I do have to make sure they align with our organizational policies. So that's where that comes in with working with your admin. Do you have a hearing protection policy written in your department? And if you don't, maybe write that one down because Joint Commission's asking that. So I wanted to share that with you guys. A specific, separate hearing policy. Just out of curiosity, this always comes up with some text. Well, the ACR says that there should be 2 people at each scanner when we're taking care of patients. So how many of you guys have 2 techs working at each scanner? How many are you?
One on each scanner on the same floor.
The ACR says 2 people, not techs. Tech and a tech aide will work. It's an interesting thing. Now, if you've never had the opportunity, as I shared, I was at Mayo. Now, there's we call it the bowling alley. It's a hallway. On either side, there are doors going in. Each room that you walk in, there are 2 MRI units. There's an entry level on either side, an entry vestibule where the patients are taken care of and screened when they come in. There's a tech at each scanner. There's another tech at each protocol computer because it takes 2 people to drive the scanners. There's a tech aide for each MRI. There's 1 nurse for those 2 scanners. And in between is a reading room. That radiologist reads what's on these 2 scanners, and that's all he does that day. That is a beautiful model, but it doesn't work everywhere else in the world. But they have 32, 36 clinical magnets, and that's how they're set up.
Where is this?
At Mayo in Rochester. Yeah. Now, they have their hospital, St. Mary's, that has a couple of MRI scanners at, and they're staffed similarly, but that's where all the inpatients are done. So these are all walkie-talkie outpatients, clinic hours, 7 to 5. It's beautiful. It doesn't work that way everywhere else in the world. I have 2 MRI scanners. I have 5 techs. We work from 7 in the morning until 11 at night. Do we have 2 techs on every scanner? No, we don't. I do have 3 tech aides. One of them is a part-timer, so that's how that works out. 2 different locations. We don't share a control room. That helps with efficiency. I have 1 in outpatient, 1 in inpatient. So we rotate them around. And because we cover Saturdays for outpatients, that means somebody's always off. So just curious, I wanted to ask you guys about that. And then are you able to, we talked about this a little bit, you're able to run your volume by resource by the time of day so you can make sure you're staffed appropriately for your busiest times. And then how many FTEs do you have? And does that coincide with what your volumes by resource are? Do you have call? Are you 24/7? That will help with your staffing models. And do you cover weekends? We talked a little bit about metrics already. What's the silliest metric that you have, in your opinion? It's important to somebody.
I get the logic of productivity numbers. I do. I absolutely do. I know why they need them. I get it completely. But you know what? I need the same amount of FTEs every day. I can't control whether my patients call in or not. I can't control if they no show or not. But I know how many are on the schedule every day, and it's full every day.
Sometimes one of the hardest conversations to have with administration is they base a lot of their decisions on census. And in imaging, in particular, census plays next to nothing into how we operate. Maybe we have a couple more inpatients that day. But we have an outpatient schedule. And sometimes that's not considered. So that's some of those things to keep in mind. Productivity, I'm right there with you. Here's where I used it that worked well, and it wasn't with admin, it was with frontline staff. I had a technologist that said, Ali never does it. He doesn't do enough work. He's slow. We need to get rid of Ali. Okay, Jessica, well, let's look and see just how things are going. So I ran a productivity report. And Ali was right there with everybody else. He was right there with everybody else. His errors, I did errors and I did volumes per day. And he goes, yeah, but Jessica said, Ali's only doing things like knees. Okay, well, let's look at that too. And then you run the report on who's doing what kind of exams. He was doing some knees. What he was mostly doing was the prostate exams because he was the guy. He was really good at it. He worked well with the patients. It's a delicate procedure for men that are uncomfortable and don't want to be there. And God knows they don't want an endorectal coil and various other things. So he's taking care of the patients in that manner. So I was able to demonstrate to her that her perception was wrong. based on the types of exams that he was doing, and he was just as productive as everybody else. And I ask that because I absolutely believe this is a great napkin note. There is nothing more useless than doing something efficiently that which should not be done at all. So, how many of you guys, I'm going to date myself. You remember the Gomer Pyle TV show that was on years ago? And the sergeant on there, he was such a hard case. He was just all over this poor Gomer Pyle guy, and had him dig in a hole, and then had him fill the hole back in. And over the course of a week, that's all he did all week was he dug a hole, 6 feet long, 4 feet wide, had all the dirt right there. And after it was done, the sergeant would come and look at it and get okay, fill it back in. What was the purpose of that? On the show, he was probably trying to teach him a lesson. There were maybe perhaps other ways to be able to do that. This is something that I share with the techs. All I want to do is sit there and push a button. Well, then you're a button pusher and you're not a technologist. I'm going to call you a technician. You want to tick off a tech? Call him a technician. It's no offense to the technicians in the group. It's not. That's one way to get techs fired up. But there are things that they can control, and they should be engaged and involved with. Patient satisfaction is one of them. And it's not all the stuff that is on these surveys. It's greeting your patients. It's using the tools that we have. It's being friendly and warm with them. You were talking the other night about your particular project with your house points and all of that. That is lovely, and I am totally stealing it. You also shared about your project. Do you mind if I talk about that?
You go right ahead.
Standing up versus sitting down, that's okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So she shared that she did a project with her staff to improve her patient satisfaction scores. But the staff rounded on inpatients and went and spoke with them. And her only instructions to half of her staff that was doing this was, you only have 3 to 4 minutes to talk with this patient. You may not sit down. And to the other half of her staff, she says, you have 3 to 4 minutes to talk with your patients. You must sit down. And then she went and rounded on the patients. And I'll let you finish telling the story if you don't mind.
The key was that it was with inpatients that I knew were going to be there and have studies 2 days prior. It didn't matter what the study was, but I knew that they were scheduled because it had to be the same patient for the right results. And like she said, I told the first group, you may not sit, and you only have 3 to 4 minutes, unless something comes up that's different, but that's it. Do your study, leave. Next day I said, you go in, same rules, you must sit. I don't have time to sit. No, you only have 3 to 4 minutes to sit. I don't care if you drag a stool behind a portable, or sit on the bed or sit on the chair in the room. You physically have to be sitting down. That same 3 to 4 minutes, do your thing. I took one of each of those group members, stand on the other side of the door so we could listen in to the conversation. I stand there. I went and sat down with the patient and said, talk to me about your experience. How did you feel? Will you talk to me about how you felt that first day? And they went, oh, they came in, they jostled me around, they took me and they left. Tell me about the second day. Tell me about that next experience. And they went, oh, she was lovely. Insert name here. She sat down with me. We talked. She cared about me. Made me feel like I was important. How long do you feel like that first person sat with you? They were here maybe a minute. And what about that second person who you said that sat down with you? Oh, they were here for at least 20 minutes. Easily 20 minutes. And I went, thank you so much. And I went back, and when I rounded the corner, you could see these faces of this just drop jaw. I was really there for the 3 to 4 minutes. I really didn't watch. And we took that back to my next staff meeting, and I let them lead that charge of the conversation. And I had tried everything to change Brascini scores, but that was the kicker. That was what created that buy-in for change there.
All about perception.
And I never had to hear that phrase, we don't have time for that. I don't have time to sit down with my patients and talk to them. We're too busy.
It's a great thing. It's about perception. It is about the connection. And, Oprah, Maya Angelou, whoever said it, people don't really care what you do. They don't care what you know. They want to know. They want to know that you care about them. And they remember how you make them feel. And whether that is 2 minutes standing up, telling them what you need, or 2 minutes sitting down with them, engaging with them, makes a big difference. Some of the things that are in the radiologist's control, but other than the guy that's doing routines, other than your fluoro guy, do your radiologists interact with the patients outside of IR? That's a whole different animal. They don't. They don't. One of the things that we did, because we were talking, if you have a breast biopsy, of course you will, but we had our breast reader of the day come for every breast MRI. Now, granted, it's not that many of them a day, but we're intimately touching patients. We want to make sure that the radiologist is involved and the patient's engaged with that. Same with the prostate. The physician is there, the digital exam occurs, and we actually had the radiologist who worked this as our practice, that they insert the indirect coil if we're using it. They appreciated that because I shared that, we have technologists that might not understand that there are things that might be pathologies in the way that we don't need to insert this coil. You need to be present. But for someone to come in for just a brain MRI, that's not going to happen. But we do need to engage them. And we certainly need to engage them in protocol development and management. And they need to give us feedback about image quality, because as a director, I'm not looking at every X-ray, MRI, and CT, so I don't have that kind of time. I don't. I do a quarterly review, but it's random. How about you guys? That's what the image analysis and the image review is. And that is actually part of the employee thing, and it goes into part of their annual assessment. So how many of you guys are around with your staff?
Yeah.
That's, if you're part of Studio or anything like that, that's actually part of that entire process, but it's also part of that relationship building. How many of you guys, and I share this because number one, the kids just cute to say, but how many of you guys have had the leader, let's call them the person you reported to, that was perhaps not the best leader ever? You can still learn from that person or those people on how not to do things. And that's what I've done in my career. I've had some great ones, I've had some not so great ones. That does really help me to focus on being the kind of leader that I want to be. What is in our control? Our attitudes, our behaviors, our skills, and our education. This is a big to-do. Techs don't like to hear it. I've never had my organization pay for 1 credit hour. Not one. And I did that for a couple of reasons. They didn't pay for a registry either. I don't know about you guys. Sometimes we're fortunate enough that we're in an educated-centric organization and it's going to happen. And when you get to a certain level, though, and those of you guys know that, you're going to get a higher level of degree, then you have to commit to more time with that organization, which is not necessarily a bad thing, unless you might be looking at other opportunities. So make sure that what you have is in your control, that you are in control of it. And then be so good they can't ignore you. One size does not fit all for MRI safety, and one size certainly doesn't fit all for leadership. We all know that. We all have to meet our staff where they are. We all have to meet our administrators where they are and at their level of understanding. And if we've crafted and cultivated those relationships that I've been kind of talking about, we're able to herd those monkeys, herd those cats, and get them where they need to be and take us with them. And we're able to either follow along and coach and nurture, or we're able to pull them along and lead the way and lead the charge. Very simply, protocols, processes, policies, practices, people, and aligning that with their personal purpose and with the organizational purpose. And if nothing else, remember this, that one kind word can change someone's entire day. And you guys, that includes you, because gosh knows, we spend all day trying to encourage our radiologists, encourage our staff. And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I go home at night and I got nothing left. I got nothing left. And my husband, God bless him, is so appreciative of that he just, here's the wine, go sit down, I got you. And I'm able to do that. We have to figure out ways to recharge. We have to share those kind words with ourselves too. Because regardless of how cheesy it is, you can't fill somebody else if your cup is empty. So you got to remember to take care of yourselves. And people that know me well will laugh so hard at that because I'm really bad at it. And most of us probably are, because we are in these positions, because we tend to extend ourselves far past what we have to give. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. I hope I was able to share some stuff with you guys that you found interesting or funny or was able to teach you something that you didn't know. I have certainly learned things from you guys. Thank you so much for sharing your stuff with us. I appreciate it. And if you guys want to reach out, please do so. From what I understand, they are going to upload this and it'll be available. That's part of why they're recording it. And you guys, MR Safety on. Thank you.